The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. As Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth, and he spat on the ground. He made clay with the saliva and smeared the clay on his eyes and said to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. And so he went and washed and came back and was able to see. Well, his neighbors and those who had seen him earlier as a beggar said, "Isn't this the one who used to sit and beg?" And some said, "It is." And others said, "No, it just looks like him." But he said, "I am." They brought the one who was once blind to the Pharisees. Now Jesus made clay, and now Jesus had opened his eyes on the Sabbath. So then the Pharisees also asked him how he was able to see. And he said, "Well, he put clay on my eyes, and I washed, and now I can see." So some Pharisees said, "Well, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath." And others said, "How can a sinful man do such signs?" And there was a division among them. So they told the blind man again, "What do you have to say about him since he opened your eyes?" And he said, "He is a prophet." They answered and said to him, "You were born totally in sin, and you're trying to teach us?" And then they threw him out. And Jesus heard that they had thrown him out. He found him and said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And the man answered and said, "Who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" And Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is he." He said, "I do believe, Lord." And he worshiped him. The Gospel of the Lord. Who are you? Who? I keep returning to this old, nearly 50-year-old song by The Who that just keeps asking the question, who are you? I've been doing that all Lent, and partly because I think there's a way in which the readings keep humming at me saying, this is about who we are. This is about acknowledging who we are and claiming that. It might be, as we do in Lent, also about looking at what we do and asking, is what I do who I am? Well, we are not the totality of our actions, but our actions can, in fact, obviously relay the values we have, the expressions and identities that we want to communicate to other people, right? And so even though we're not our actions, we might want to review our actions, our behavior, so that we can say, is it consistent with who I know myself to be? Today's gospel is yet another one of those encounters where Jesus is able to encounter someone and say, I know you've been told who you are. Like the woman at the well, this man born blind has been told, because he was born with an infirmity, a disability, that there's a whole theological reason for that, and it has to do with God's punishment. And then, of course, he's relegated to a marginalized, if not outrightly ostracized place in society. He's certainly been pigeonholed and categorized and set aside. He is defined by his disability and dismissed for kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, folk thinking about why that disability exists. Jesus blows all that open. And in fact, they look at him, those authorities that are alarmed at the fact that he can now see. And they, of course, went to his parents to get an explanation, who were like, why don't you ask him yourself? Which is probably remarkable on their part, partly because they didn't want to get in trouble for giving the wrong answer and be accused of being heretical or following Jesus and whatever. So they said, they put it back on their son. But that might have been the first time they ever did that they said, he's empowered to speak for himself. And so they finally get to him here in this part of the gospel, and they ask him, his neighbors and others, and they said, this is God, is this him? He now can see? Is this really the guy who used to just beg on the street? He was a beggar. He was, homeless. He was whatever the tag is, the descriptor we place on them and dismiss that. That's how they did it. And instead he said, no, I'm that guy. I am. He's speaking for himself, as himself. Who is he? He's who he is. And he's not afraid to say that now. He's beyond the categorizations he's been given, and he's certainly breaking out of the ostracization that he's lived probably his whole life. However, Jesus is also willing to say who he is. Because here at the end, when Jesus follows up with him and finds out this guy has been dismissed, in fact, they were offended. Who are you? Who are you, this poor person, this beggar? You tell us what we should think. They get into this exchange, and they throw him out. And because of that, Jesus follows up with him. We find out how this guy's doing and sees him after he'd been thrown out and said, well, what do you believe now? This guy goes, I'd love to believe in something that's whole and good, this Son of Man, somebody who's going to restore us to our full humanity, who's going to help us reform our community so that we don't keep doing this to each other. And then Jesus says, I'm here. You've seen him, the one speaking with you. That's me. Jesus is claiming who he is. And so, friends, I think as we continue our Lenten journey, you and I might want to really look at this, because I don't know about you, but there are times when I've had my own behavior and thought, what am I doing? This isn't consistent with who I am. My conscience tells me that. My own guilty reaction, a healthy sense of guilt, makes me say, geez, I feel badly that I did that. And that's a big part of my Lenten journey. It should be a big part of all of our Lenten journeys, I think, to look at those things, because they're not consistent with who we are, who God made us to be. But as we do that kind of examination, we have to keep asking the question, like, who am I really? Like, what does this mean for me now as I grow, as my society changes? I need to keep checking in on who I am so that I can live that authentically with integrity. And so I think in today's gospel, we see an example of that, because more often than not, as we keep answering the question who we are as individuals, it begs the question of who we are as a community. Because I keep opening up my news feed and I keep thinking, my God, who are we becoming with these actions that we're doing? Because they don't communicate my values. They don't communicate a world I want to live in. They don't communicate a world that I'd like to contribute to and construct with others. Not at all. And so we need to keep asking this Lenten season who we are, so that we can look around and say we need to become, as a community, something different so it can be consistent with who we truly are. And so, friends, it might be that today we keep hearing that question from that old song by The who are you? And keep asking it, who are you? Then we can ask, who do we want to be as a community? Because, friends, we're in trouble. And that trouble needs to have the insights that can come to us as individuals with an authentic journey, just like we see in today's gospel. And we need to say, who are you, God, for me right now? I know you're here. You're following up with me like you did with that man born blind. And now I can say to you, maybe a little bit more on my Lenten journey, who I am and who I'm called to be, so that I can reach out to others and start to construct a different kind of community. Amen.